your phone. This thing seems to run our lives these days, and with new apps coming out every day, it's replacing a lot of other technology, including the good old wallet. But don't bet on the demise of the dollar bill anytime soon. Here's a few reasons why cash will likely never go away. Governments would lose the ability to ward off economic calamity. If people start flocking to alternate currencies, governments lose much of their power to influence economic issues such as inflation and unemployment. Not everyone has a bank account. The FDIC reports roughly 20 million Americans don't have access to banking services. In 2016, the Identity Theft Resource Center estimated 1 in every 16 people was a victim of identity theft. The best remedy against that? Cash. Right now, virtual currency is still risky and most people don't trust it. Cash is also essential in a crisis. And really, we just end up using something else. We think of cash as paper bills, but realistically, anything that serves as a means of exchange would serve the purpose that cash currently holds. It's called the barter system. And if you think old fuddy-duddies are the only ones using cash, you're totally wrong. Surprisingly, according to the Federal Reserve, younger generations are actually more likely to use cash. It's convenient, reliable, widely accepted, and anonymous. So as of now, cash still reigns king in America.